Jean Ann Verlee wrote, "When a boy you think you love delivers the first black eye, use a screwdriver, a beer bottle, your two good hands. When your father locks the door, break the window. When a college professor writes you poetry and whispers about your tight little butt, do not take it as a compliment. Do not wait. Call the dean. Call his wife. When a boy with good manners and a thirst for Budweiser proposes, say no. When your mother hits you, do not strike back." Women today are often objectified, catcalled, and treated like property, but not all women are created equal. Some of them are willing to take that with a grain of salt, and some are willing to fight back. In Rondo Redouble by Wendy Cope, we see a woman that is tired of playing games. In The Cell Block Tango by Bob Fosse, we see a group of women that have had enough, and in Bossy Pants and Remembrances by Tina Fey, we can see that even successful women are not exempt from the discrimination. There are so many kinds of awful men. One can't avoid them all. She often said she'd never make the same mistake again. She always made a new mistake instead. The chinless type who made her feel ill-bred, the practiced charmer, less than charming, when he talked about the wife and kids he fled. There are so many kinds of awful men. The half-crazed hippie, deeply into Zen, whose cryptic homilies she came to dread. The fervent youth who worshipped Tony Benn. One can't avoid them all, she said. The aging banker, rich and overfed, who held forth on the dollar and then the yen. There were many more mistakes ahead. She'd never make the same mistake again. The budding poet, scribbling in his den, odes not to her, but to his cat, Fred. The drunk who fell asleep at 9 or 10, she always made a new mistake instead. And so the gambler was at least unwed, and didn't preach, or sneer, or wield a pen, or hoard his wealth, or take the Scotch to bed. She'd lived and learned, and lived and learned, but then, there are so many kinds. And now the 6 merry murderesses of the Crookham County Jail in their rendition of The Cell Block Tango. Pop, 6, squish, Cicero Lipschitz. He had it coming. He only had himself to blame. If you'd have been there, if you had seen it, I bet you would have done the same. You know, people have these little habits that get you down, like Ernie. Ernie liked to chew gum. No, not chew. Pop. Like, I come home this one day, and there's Ernie, laying on the couch, chewing. No, not chewing. Popping. So I said to him, Ernie, you pop that gum one more time. And he did. So I took the shotgun off the wall, and I fired 2 warning shots. Into his head. I met Ezekiel Young from Salt Lake City about 2 years ago, and he told me he was single, and we hit it off right away. So we started living together. He'd go to work, he'd come home, I'd fix him a drink, we'd have dinner. Then I found out, single my ass. Not only was he married, he had 6 wives. One of those Mormons, you know. So that night, when he came home, I fixed him his drink as usual. You know, some guys just can't hold their arsenic. He had it coming. He took a flower in its prime, and then he used it, and he abused it. It was a murder, but not a crime. I'm standing in the kitchen, carving up the chicken for dinner, and in storms my husband Wilbur in a jealous rage. "You been screwing the milkman," he says. And he just kept saying, "You been screwing the milkman." Then he ran into my knife. He ran into my knife 10 times. My sister Veronica and I had this double act, and my husband Charlie traveled around with us. With the last number in our act, we did 20 acrobatic tricks in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, splits, spread eagles, flip-flops, backflips, one after the other. Well, this one night we were in Cicero, the 3 of us, and we were in the hotel room boozing, having a few laughs, and, well, we ran out of ice. And when I went out to get some and came back and opened the door, there's Veronica and Charlie doing the number 17, the spread eagle. I was in such a state of shock, I completely blacked out and can't remember a thing. It wasn't until later, when I was washing the blood off my hands, that I even knew they were dead. I loved Alvin Lipschitz. He was a real artistic guy, sensitive, a painter, but he was always trying to find himself. He'd go out every night looking for himself, and on the way he found Ruth, Gladys, Rosemary, and Irving. I guess you can say we broke up because of artistic differences. He saw himself alive, and I saw him dead. He had it coming. He had it coming all along. He only had himself to blame. If you'd been there, if you had seen it, I bet you would have done the same. People often ask me about the difference between male and female comedians. Do men and women find different things funny? I usually attempt an answer that is so diplomatic and boring that the person will just walk away. Something like, there's a tremendous amount of overlap in what men and women think is funny, and I hate to generalize, but I would say at the far ends of the spectrum, men may prefer visceral, absurd elements like sharks and robots, while women are more drawn to character-based jokes and verbal idiosyncrasies. Have you walked away yet? Dear Internet, one of my greatest regrets is that I don't always have time to answer the wonderful correspondence I receive. When people care enough to write, the only well-mannered thing to do is return the gift. So please indulge me as I answer some fans here. Posted by Jerk Store on Wednesday, January 21st at 11:21 p.m. In my opinion, Tina Fey completely ruined SNL. The only reason she's celebrated is because she's a woman and an outspoken liberal. She has not a single funny bone in her body. Dear Jerk Store, huzzah for the truth teller. Women in this country have been over-celebrated for too long. Just last night there was a story on my local news about a missing girl, and they must have dedicated 7 or 8 minutes to where she was last seen or how she might have been abducted by a close family friend. And I thought, what is this? News for chicks? Then there was some story about Hillary Clinton flying to some country because she's Secretary of State. Why do we keep talking about these dum-dums? We're a society that constantly celebrates no one but women, and it's gotta stop. I want to hear what the men of the world have been up to. What fun new guns have they invented? What are they raping these days? What's Michael Bay's next film gonna be? When I first set out to ruin SNL, I didn't think anyone would notice. But I persevered because, like you trying to do a 9-piece jigsaw puzzle, it was a labor of love. I'm not one to toot my own horn, but I feel safe with you, Jerk Store, so I'll say it. Everything you ever hated on SNL was by me, and everything you ever loved was by me, or was done by others against my will. Remembrances of being very skinny. For a brief time at the turn of the century, I was skinny. This is what I remember. I was cold all the time. I had a pair of size 4 corduroy short shorts that I wore to work in the middle of Manhattan. I loved it when people told me I was getting too thin. I once took a bag of sliced red peppers to the beach as a snack. I regularly ate health food cookies so disgusting that when I enthusiastically gave one to Rachel Dratch, she drew a picture of a rabbit and broke the cookie into a trail of tiny pieces coming out of the rabbit's butt. Men I had met before suddenly paid attention to me, and I hated them for it. Sometimes I had to sleep with a pillow between my legs because my bony knees clanking together kept me awake. I had a lot of time on my hands because I wasn't constantly eating. I ran 3 miles on a treadmill 6 days a week. I felt wonderfully superior to everyone. I didn't have a kid yet. We should leave people alone about their weight. Being skinny for a while, provided you actually eat food and don't take pills or smoke to get there, is a perfectly fine pastime. Everyone should try it once, like a super short haircut or dating a white guy. Remembrances of being a little bit fat. For a brief time at the end of that last century, I was overweight. This is what I remember about that. My boobs were bigger. I once left a restaurant in the middle of dessert to go get Krispy Kreme before it closed. Even though I only like McDonald's fries, I believed it was more nutritious to make a meal and have 2 cheeseburgers with it. If I was really ambitious, I would get a Whopper Jr. at Burger King and then walk to McDonald's to get the fries. Shake could be from anywhere. I wore oversized men's overalls that I loved. Guys who were friends did not want to date me, and I hated them for it. On at least 3 occasions, I vomited on Christmas Eve from mixing chocolate, peel-and-eat shrimp, summer sausage, and cheese. No alcohol was involved. Once, while ironing in my underwear, I grazed my protruding belly with the hot iron. We should leave people alone about their weight. Being chubby for a while, provided you don't give yourself diabetes, is a natural phase of life, and nothing to be ashamed of. like puberty, or slowly turning into a Republican.